heard the rumors that Cleon had the last intelligent robot in the galaxy.
You once told me that stories become burdens if left untold.
Is forever Empress.
I have stories in me.
How old are you?
I have told you. Just over 18,000 years.
I know what you are.
I'm not human. You're mechanical nature.
And the rest of your kind died.
They didn't die. Robots were destroyed.
By your kind.
I love the
The
Cleon.
closest thing to a mother I ever had.
Body and soul. I remember you. Just 1 year old when I sleep. You pointed up to the sky and showed me the sun. You were so proud. As though you'd only just discovered it was there and you were sharing it with me. He looked at me with such desire. As though I were a mystery he would sacrifice everything to solve. He rescued me. And I loved him. But I also know he programmed me to love. So I'm left to wonder, if it weren't for this directive, would my feelings be the same? And I hate him for that. If you feel lust, or even love, you do not wonder where it comes from. This is not the case for me. Your parents, your siblings, burnt alive by the very air around them, killed with the sort of precision I bring to my work. You're a sperm led by its waving flagellum, mistaking its random motion for complexity.
I forgive you, Demerzel.
A moment in 5,000 years. Time enough to break his neck.
You must want this to come to an end.
Of course I do.
Human, a robot, a servant, a warrior, a lab experiment, a prisoner, a bride, a mother, and a pale reaper. But no other title fits better for what she's endured than that of the Forever Empress. Hello Foundation fans, fellow Mudbeards, and anyone else who can't help but be captured by Laurabirn's performance in Demerzel. And today I wanted to bring forth one more and potentially my final character breakdown for the Foundation series. I have a few other character breakdowns out there, but I knew I for sure had to get Demerzel in at some point. So today we're going to be talking about Demerzel, her story throughout the show, some theories for where she'll be going, and some potential book connections. So spoilers will start off light, and as the video progresses, we'll be getting a little more spoilery. So if you want to go into the season clean without any information, feel free to click off now. And by the end of the video, I'll be breaking down Demerzel's potential fate by the end of the story, and how her potential freedom could result in the lives of one of the main characters being completely destroyed. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. Demerzel is probably the oldest living being within the Foundation series,
I'll always be here, as I always have been.
outside of one other, that being Gaal, or whatever entity is taking the form of Gaal. But I'll touch more on that by the end of the video. Point is, Demerzel was based off of a human model. Essentially, as an android, she was built to resemble a human in some way.
It's a woman's name, as that is how I appear now.
And I do think there's more to that, but we'll get into that in just a little bit. So, for a long time, as a robot, she was forced to follow the Zeroth Law, which essentially meant she couldn't hurt humans or bring harm to humans. Which means, while at first, being a robot, she probably was very useful and utilized amongst the Galactic Empire or whatever was established during the time, because humanity, with more complacency, we grow more lazy and dependent on some of the tools we have around us. So odds are, the robots of the world ended up taking a lot more agency than a lot of people realized. So for a while, rather than being a useful tool, she was instead a servant. Which again, part of her programming, she was designed to be okay with this. She didn't really have a problem. However, there came another conflict when a decision had to be made on how to best take care of humanity, as humanity tended to lean towards decisions that would ultimately lead to their own downfall. With our self-sabotaging behavior, some androids felt they needed to take action in order to actually protect humanity. Demerzel even references a particular android who broke away from the programming and tried to figure out how to take care of humanity as a whole rather than the individual. This led to the Robot Wars, where robots would fight other robots to decide how to best take care of humans. And seeing how Demerzel carries herself, we can assume these robots weren't just autonomous walking toasters, these were beings with actual feelings, forced to follow a certain set of programs. And during this conflict, one of the robots ended up bringing harm to one of the galactic empires. This resulted in a purge of all androids and all android sympathizers. A lot of these androids and said sympathizers would be hung on the hanging trees outside of the Imperial Palace. Now, a key thing to note, if Demerzel happened to be around during this time, seeing as she's the only survivor of the Robot Wars, Is it potentially possible that she was there at the exact same tree, watching her own people and sympathizers be hung? Which really makes you think how she must feel walking around the Imperial Palace and the Imperial Gardens every single day for several thousand years. But essentially, during the Robot Wars, Demerzel, being known as a general and a great leader during this time, ended up going into a conflict she didn't make it out of and getting captured by Emperor Albunaris. Emperor Albunaris had decided to dissect Demerzel, seeing her model specifically as one that was different than the rest. So with different ways he would study her, Demerzel realized that he got a certain reaction out of seeing her suffer. So she would force and produce tears to hopefully keep him more engaged and keep herself around. Eventually, as time went on, he realized that while he was studying Demerzel was simultaneously studying him. Realizing that she could utilize some of the knowledge he's learned to potentially bring back her species, he decided instead to stop studying her and separate her like a petri dish and keep her imprisoned in a dark room underneath the Imperial Palace for many, many years. So essentially, she went through a civil war for a species that wasn't her own, ended up being discriminated against because of her species, ended up fighting for the rights of her species, presumably as a general in the end, and losing.
I was a leader of soldiers.
Robots were built and capable of harming us, weren't they? How did you even fight?
So robots went to war with each other over what to do with you. A robot killed an important man in service of the Zeroth Law, and our fate was sealed. After we lost a famous battle, I was taken captive and brought before Emperor Aburanis. He made incisions and studied what he found. He loved to watch my face too, to see how I reacted.
And then being turned into an experiment before being completely torn apart and left in isolation for thousands of years, presumably in complete and utter darkness, left alone with her thoughts and reflections and perfect memories of all the events that had transpired. That is until the reign of the Untun dynasty, when the prince at the time, Cleon, happened to stumble through the murals throughout the Imperial Palace and find Demerzel. Upon finding her, they did form a quick relationship, with her telling him stories and showing him compassion in some way, and him keeping her a secret from the rest of the Imperial family. Over time, their bond grew, and eventually Cleon reached the point where he was ready to ascend to being in charge. But with the roles of responsibility that were being placed upon him, he was finding himself stressed out. You can see Demerzel utilizes this chance to kind of subtly influence herself as an advisor for Cleon. But Cleon, being overwhelmed and probably stressed with everything going on, doesn't take her up on this opportunity. Over time, however, Cleon eventually softened up, and rather than keep her separated like a petri dish, he instead put her back together, still within a prison, but at least she was mobile and able to move around. It's during this time, seeing how Cleon has reached his adulthood, that Demerzel switched her storytelling to be a little bit more seductive. The stories, rather than being kid-friendly, now being more adult-oriented, making sure that Cleon would become enraptured with her. Eventually, as time went on, Cleon reached a ripe old age and was prepared to get married to someone before he completely called it off. Instead, coming down to Demerzel and revealing that he'd rather free her and end up marrying her as an individual instead. Demerzel, with a few seconds of freedom, truly does believe that Cleon loves her, and there is a chance he truly did. But there's one important factor that she didn't realize about Cleon, and that's that he's a prideful piece of shit. So essentially, rather than trusting her or give her any form of freedom of will, he instead implants a chip in her that forces her to do whatever he says, and also essentially forces her to love him. This love programming immediately takes effect when he demands that she actually tries to hurt him, and you can see she does try, but she is unable to do so with the conflicting programming. It's after this that he decides to throw out a proposal, and she does actually say yes, but not because she realized she's trapped and there's no other choice, but because part of her programming makes her actually feel love towards Cleon. And that's what sucks, is even Cleon himself says he wished he proposed before he implanted the chip, because there is a potential chance that she would have actually been in love with him either way. But who knows, she could have eventually utilized that freedom to escape and realize that love wasn't as important as living on and bringing back her species. Either way, the ifs and ands don't matter, because the actual actions took place that day to turn her into the forever Empress. Essentially, he told her that he would be taking care of his lineage to the end of time. He's going to be starting the genetic dynasty, a series of clones based off of his DNA that will be able to keep the Empire going through his image and through his ideals. And while they will essentially be the puppets to represent him and his figure, she will be the one actually running Empire until the end of time. Demerzel immediately realizes this is an actual freedom, and he decides he doesn't actually care. And where did he find such a powerful piece of programming? Well, there is a theory about that I'll touch into by the end of the video. But what if there was another purpose for Cleon doing this outside of pride and wanting his reign to last longer than him? But I'll get into that later by the end of the video. Essentially, this turned Demerzel into a bride, where she followed Cleon I and helped him rule the Empire for many years, including starting the construction of the Star Bridge, Trantor and the Empire's most monumental technological feat yet. And that's crazy considering they have orbital rings in Season 2 and jump gates in Season 3, but surprisingly enough, these are better examples of why the Empire is dwindling. Feel free to check out my Rings of Trantor video for more information on that. But essentially, Cleon didn't even live long enough to see the construction of the Star Bridge be finished, and thus Demerzel started the immediate raising of the genetic dynasty. And seeing as she was in prison for a lot of the time that she knew Cleon, she never got to see how Cleon interacted with the rest of the galaxy. And I'm pretty sure it came as a surprise when Cleon II instigated the entire conflict between the Anacreon and Thespins. Seeing as the marriage that was supposed to take place between those houses would have unified them, and Cleon II just couldn't risk that, setting up an assassination attempt and then pretty much getting away with this scot-free. And this same beef between the Anacreon and Thespin people will return, but I'll get into that in just a second. For a long time, Demerzel was a mother to the rest of the genetic dynasty, making sure they were all raised in the image and in the same purpose that Cleon I intended them. And what sucks the most is she would know these Cleons from their fetal forms in the decampment chambers, and basically see them grow all the way up into the point where she was forced to kill them in their brother knight form. Meaning that essentially by the end of Season 1, she's watched 11 of her own children growing up and dying in front of her, while also guiding them towards their own death and destruction. And while being forced to stand by and let them do whatever they really wanted to if it meant Empire was still prosperous. And while the Empire was prosperous, the Cleons were able to have a lot more agency in their decisions. Like when Anacreon and Thespis decided to get revenge after some long years of turmoil, they decided to blow up the Star Bridge. And how did the Cleons respond to this? By blowing up half of the planets of Anacreon and Thespin, despite their pleas that they weren't actually involved. Now, universally, this was not the best move for Empire and did actually hurt them in the long run, but at the time for Demerzel, there was nothing they could do to stop it. So Demerzel was not just forced to witness so much death around her, not just forced to kill her own children after watching them grow up and not being able to guide them towards better decisions, but is also the personal hitman for the Empire when they have political figures they probably have to deal with. See, when the Empire was trying to figure out what happened behind the Star Bridge attack, Demerzel and her squad of Imperial guards were the ones that did the investigating. When the Empire reached conflict with another religious faction, Demerzel was the one who was forced to get rid of the Zephyr, despite the fact that the Zephyr was no longer a threat and Demerzel did enjoy her. This essentially results in Demerzel being the permanent Pale Reaper for the Empire. But we see with Demerzel's programming, she's reaching more of an internal conflict. See, with the Empire's drastic decisions as time goes on, and their dwindling of control as a consequence of said decisions, Demerzel's programming can really go any direction in regards to keeping Empire prosperous. Which brings me to my next theory, and this theory will be touching into some book stuff, so please step away if you don't want any potential spoilers, but I do think there's some big stuff coming Demerzel's way. We'll start off this theory with the idea that Demerzel went from a human to an android. Now, I firmly believe with the emotions displayed that Demerzel actually possesses, that potentially androids are machines that are host bodies for human minds. Yes, that's right, this theory will be a very tinfoily one. But essentially, if the idea like Westworld's fidelity, or the idea of a singularity, as in transferring the human conscious into an eternal robot body, somehow existed within the Foundation universe, then it's possible that whatever human person Demerzel was made off of could have had her consciousness transferred over or replicated in the Demerzel body. Now keep that in mind because I will touch on it more in just a second. But essentially, let's cut to the fact that Demerzel was an android and imprisoned by Cleon. Now, if this is the case and everything we hear about Demerzel's story is somewhat accurate, it would mean that she is not actually the character from the books known as Daneel. But that doesn't mean we haven't seen Daneel so far within the story. Now, one of the primary reasons I don't believe that Demerzel is actually Daneel is because of her conversation with the Zephyr underneath the apple tree. Essentially, when the robot wars started, it's because of one robot in particular realizing they should look out for humanity as a whole rather than humanity as the individual. Fans of the book series know that Daneel's primary purpose throughout the entire story is basically to get humanity to the point of oneness. Demerzel even mentions during the conversation that the way described to save humanity would mean some drastic measures needed to be taken. Now in the books it's revealed that everything in the Foundation series, Mentalics, Empire, Psychohistory, all of it was just part of this very convoluted and complicated plan by daneel in the hopes of creating a oneness for humanity. But given how the story's been displayed so far, it's very obvious that Demerzel is not going to take off her mask and reveal that this was her goal the entire time. Versus in the books, Demerzel was actually a disguise daneel used. It looks like in the series, they're going a different direction. Now, why do I say all this? I think because in the background, daneel's always been there, moving the chess pieces around. But we've seen them quite a few times, that being the form of Yana and Calais within the Prime Radiant. I truly do believe that this entity that Harry Seldon encountered is actually daneel. And the last we see of this entity is on Una's world right before they give Harry a physical body, which has still yet to be answered how they exactly did this. Now, knowing that Calais/daneel is somewhere out there in the galaxy, and most people don't even know of their existence, who is likely to find them? Probably someone with a lot of resources and someone who is looking very hard for something else entirely. That being none other than Cleon the First. See, I firmly believe that while Cleon was looking for a way to keep Demerzel programmed in a certain condition, it will be revealed that he actually came across Calais/daneel, and whatever advice or technology they gave to help Cleon take control of Demerzel essentially was all part of daneel's actual plan. Now, it's very possible that daneel, or whatever this entity is, needed Demerzel around as an android/servant/prisoner/forever empress, all the other titles, because they were the only ones capable and human enough to guide humanity to where it needed to go, and potentially be the one person who could stop a big coming threat within the story, that being the Mule. Now, the Mule is what's known as a Mentalic. Mentalics are essentially like Jedi from Star Wars. They possess psychic abilities, only unlike Star Wars, it's a lot less of a hassle for them to enact some of these powers. The reason they are such a threat is they can walk up to entire planets and just simply demand that they belong to them, and it just sort of works out. The one thing that can sort of counter Mentalic is technology. Things like the discs we saw in Season 2, or maybe even androids themselves, seeing as their minds can't be tampered with by the Mule's abilities. But Demerzel is seemingly the only android out there, so she would need a lot more help if she was going to take on the Mule, I feel like. That will lead me to my final theory here, and that's how Demerzel's story will lead to the dark fate of a very primary character within the Foundation series. That being Gaal Dornick. Now, I really hope Gaal makes it, and I hope this isn't how Gaal's story concludes, because I feel like it would be a big middle finger to all the torment she already faced. But essentially, through some of the trailer analysis and some of the dialogue we've gotten, both in the cast interviews and the actual first episode, I'm thinking this could potentially be the last season for Demerzel or Gaal. Now, this theory is going to be extremely tinfoily, and if it's wrong, I'm going to look extremely foolish. Still, I hope you guys enjoyed the character breakdown up to this point, and I hope it was pretty enjoyable. That being said, what I think is that based off of these shots within the trailer, where we see Gaal and Demerzel within the beggar seemingly having a conversation about how to stop the Mule, we see at some point Demerzel chokeslams Gaal, and at some point Gaal sort of wakes up. But there's another little sneak peek snippet we get that shows seemingly Demerzel's hands on top of Gaal's face or forehead, sending glowing lines down her face. Now, I'm not really sure what an android could do to a Mentalic or the connections between the two, but if there is some sort of loose connection between Mentalics and Spacers, and if you look at them sort of as a human computer, sort of like Mentats from the Dune universe, as in there isn't some Force-like spirit or entity giving the Mentalics these abilities, but there actually is some sort of brain evolution going on that allows them to enact these sort of things, then I truly do think if you look back at the idea that the first human Demerzel was based off of could have had her consciousness replicated or brought over to Demerzel's android form, if that sort of technology or processing exists,
they could go the route from the books where Gaal would be taking on sort of the role of Thalum, a character who daneel debated on merging minds with to help save humanity. But seeing as the show's already made so many changes, I think that there's a chance this could be Gaal's role now, and it could end up being just a little darker.
Potentially Demerzel could be transferring her consciousness over to Gaal's body. I know, it sounds crazy, but let's keep something in mind. If Mentalic abilities work based off the capability of the neurological pathways or whatever have you in someone's cognitive nature, then you can assume that Demerzel as a consciousness would be a lot more capable of performing these Mentalic abilities at a much more higher level. This would mean that the best way to fight the Mule would be to have someone who could utilize the Mentalic powers to their ultimate extent. And seeing as Gaal is not as experienced as Demerzel, not as combat-oriented as Demerzel, and Demerzel just seems to be a lot more efficient at taking on the mule if she herself had powers, it just seems like this could be a very potential real possibility if the technology does exist. And if this process does work, it could mean that Gaal could wake up in Demerzel's body and find that she's pretty upset she's now an android and Demerzel has taken over her own body. And Demerzel maybe would even feel a little bad for doing this, but seeing as her primary programming is to keep Empire flowing, maybe she sees this as the only mathematical solution to stopping the mule. Which means as hard as Gaal fought to keep her body her own when Tellum tried to take it over, eventually someone did. If you've noticed in Gaal's startup monologues throughout each episode or each season of the series, whenever she's referencing things from the exact point in time season 3 takes place. Nothing past the events of season 3 has ever been mentioned before. At least not as far as I can think of. Please let me know down in the comments if I'm wrong about that. But either way, we're leading to the point where Empire seems to be falling soon, and whether it does or doesn't, Demerzel's gonna have to make some serious choices and do some self-reflecting to decide where exactly her place is within the Foundation's universe. But what do you guys think? Is Demerzel your favorite character? Where do you think her story will exactly go? And how do you think she'll inevitably break away from the Empire's clutches? If you like, share, and comment, it lets me know I should make more videos like this. Otherwise, you can check out my other Foundation videos that includes character breakdowns and theories and just breakdowns of the universe as a whole. Either way, thank you all for watching, thank you all for your support, and please just let Demerzel and Gaal both be happy by the end of the season. Have a good one, y'all.